Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now, let's start with the first story, shall we? It's called Maintenance Tickets. I used to work for a large corporation as a shift manager in our data center. Part of my job was reviewing the tickets from the prior shift, and like most companies, we had a ticketing system that everyone used. Well, almost everyone. Our night maintenance worker handled tasks like fixing clogged toilets and replacing light bulbs. He wasn't used to using the ticketing system, but new management decided that he needed to track his work, just like everyone else. Needless to say, he wasn't thrilled about it, but he complied in his own unique way. Although this happened a few years ago, and I don't have the exact wording, some of his entries stuck with me because they were just so funny. Here are a few that I remember. Asked to unclog the toilet in the women's bathroom on the 4th floor. Found what looked to be several pounds of waste and 1.5 rolls of toilet paper. Had to punch that doggy several times before it cleared. Another one was asked to replace light bulb above the receptionist's desk. Evidently not bright enough for her to fix her makeup. Added 2 200-watt bulbs. Should be bright enough for her to see herself now. After a month of these hilarious entries, I noticed they suddenly stopped coming in. The next time I saw him, I asked why I wasn't seeing any more tickets from him. With a big smile, he told me they had taken his access to the ticketing system away. His entries might not have been the most professional, but they certainly gave us all a good laugh while they lasted. The next story is called Heating Compliance. Let me tell you about my housemates, who are quite possibly the most insufferable people on the planet. Both of them have these ridiculous pet peeves they get so worked up over. For one of them, it's leaving drawers or cabinets open, even by a tiny fraction of an inch. If she catches you, she'll literally scream and even threaten to hit you. The other one is obsessed with the door, the leaky faucet. He's convinced everyone is sabotaging it on purpose. And he goes absolutely berserk if a light is on for even a few seconds. His most recent obsession is the heat. He's decided that having it on at all is something worth raging war over. We live in a 2-story house. Roommate number 1 sleeps downstairs, while I and roommate number 2 sleep upstairs. My room is on the north side of the house. It has horrible insulation, while roommate number 2 has great insulation on the south side. But that doesn't justify his actions, especially since he's also a landlord for another property and knows it's required to keep the heat at least at 60 degrees to meet legal standards and avoid pipe damage. I try to avoid them by staying upstairs most of the time, but he goes out of his way to come upstairs every few hours just to check the thermostat. If it's set to anything above off, he'll barge in and demand I stop playing with the heat. Lately, the night temperatures have been dropping down to just above freezing temperatures. One night, I turned the heat up to a mere 60 degrees Fahrenheit, because I didn't want the pipes in my room to freeze. Plus, I have a pet mice, and they literally can survive in temperatures lower than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. At around 1 AM, I woke up freezing in my room. It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and my dog was whining. That's when I realized what had happened. He had come upstairs, turned the heat off, and even came into my room to complain while I was asleep. I knew because my door was wide open, and I always keep it shut and locked because of how unpredictable and aggressive they are. That was the last straw. So the next day I went out and bought a 1500-watt convection heater and a heating pad for my mice. They are now running nearly 24/7. The best part is that roommate number 2 pays the majority of the electric bill. If he wants to play Lord of the Thermostat and keep the heat off to the point where it's literally illegal and could destroy the pipes, then he can also pay the extra $200 a month to heat my room. I guess some lessons come with a price. The third story is called paper policy. I work in a small office, and like many companies, we have that one manager who's obsessed with cutting costs. Ours is Mark. Mark wasn't a bad guy, but he had this laser focus on reducing expenses, no matter how small. His biggest obsession was paper. He was convinced we were blowing our budget on printing, so he implemented a new policy. Everything had to be printed double-sided. And this wasn't a suggestion, it was a hard rule. Mark sent out an email to the whole office, CCing HR to make it official. From this point forward, all printing must be double-sided, no exceptions. If we catch unnecessary single-sided printing, there will be consequences. Now, most of us didn't think it was a huge deal for internal documents, but for client documents, contracts and legal forms, stuff that sometimes had to be single-sided, it became a problem. A few of us brought this up to Mark, but his response was always the same. Rules are rules. Double-sided saves us money. Stick to the policy. A couple of weeks later, we get this massive contract from one of our biggest clients. Let's call them Green Tech. The deal was huge. One of the biggest projects we'd handled all year. And it came with a ton of paperwork. The instructions from Green Tech were crystal clear. The contract had to be printed single-sided to meet their legal department standards. I figured this might be one of those rare cases where Mark would make an exception. So I went to him, explained the situation, and showed him the client's instructions. Mark just shrugged and said, "Company policy is company policy. We are not wasting paper. Double-sided." At this point, I knew exactly how this was going to go. But fine, rules are rules. I printed the entire 80-page contract double-sided and sent it off to the client. Fast forward a couple of days, and we get an email from Green Tech. They were not happy. They demanded we reprint the entire contract single-sided, as per their instructions, or they'd reconsider doing business with us. I showed the email to Mark, and you should have seen his face turn red. He had no choice but to backtrack. We had to reprint the entire contract correctly and rush ship it to Green Tech overnight, which ended up costing way more than the tiny amount Mark was trying to save on paper. After that whole fiasco, Mark rightly rolled back the no exceptions rule for double-sided printing, and we were all allowed to use our judgment on a case-by-case basis. Funny how a little compliance with bad policies can show why they don't work in practice. The last story is called Room Service Policy. About 2 decades ago, I worked for a company that reimbursed meals when you were out of town on business. But there was one catch: no room service. Even if you ordered within the meal allowance, it was strictly forbidden. One time, after an exhausting 14-hour workday that started at 6:30 AM and ended at 8:30 PM, I was too tired to go out. I ordered room service, fully within the allowed budget, thinking nothing of it. But when I submitted the receipt, accounts bounced it. I had to pay out of pocket, because I had dared to order from my room instead of dragging myself out. Fast forward a bit, and I found myself in a similar situation. I was meeting with 2 sets of clients in my suite, in a country a continent away. The first meeting overran, leaving me with just 1 hour before the next, and I still had to set up the room. There was no way I had time to leave, grab food, and get everything ready for the next meeting. So I decided to handle it by the book. I called accounts from halfway across the world, knowing full well that long-distance calls back then were ridiculously expensive. The assistant manager answered, and I explained the situation. I need to know if I can order room service. There's just barely enough time for me to eat before the next meeting, and I still have to set up. I'll hold until the manager's available. 10 minutes later, the manager finally picked up. You do realize this call is probably costing more than your meal, right? Of course, but I don't want to break company policy. So, do I have your approval to order room service? The manager sighs. Yes, you may. Next time use your discretion and common sense. But common sense isn't that common in this company. From that point on, she never messed with me on reimbursements again. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.